Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Below the Line podcast presented by Wicked Minis. It's the new year, and if you're looking for a new splash of flavor to spice up your 2024, look no further than Wicked Minis. They're good on soups, salads, or just as a handheld snack. You can get yours today and start your New Year's off right at moonlightmixes.com. Our guest today is Mr. Ed McLean, a man that is doing something really good, not just for racing, but really good for the veterans of this country. So I'm going to let him explain this because he knows much more about it than I do, sir. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Samuel. I really do appreciate you having me on your podcast. I think it's really important that we get the word out on this program. The Warriors2Racers program has been around now for just over a year. So it's very new, but it's already grown across the U.S. We have members as far west as Utah, and then we're hitting the extremes on north and south. Texas, we have enough people in Texas. We have our Texas state rep. And then Michigan is our other area. We have quite a few people up there as well. So just a pretty broad brush when it comes to membership. The Warriors2Racers program came about now, like I said, a year from this past November. Is it okay if I share? I've got like a timeline I can show.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry, the screen with my timeline is up over my right shoulder here. Hopefully you can see this. The history of Warriors2Racers started off a couple of years ago now. I was running as a driver with an American endurance racing team. I've been racing a very long time. I got about 30 years of racing experience doing all kinds of things from autocrossing to time trials to Formula cars. Had my pro license for a little bit and then eventually made it into endurance racing. And I really liked that format. Brought in a couple of guys through a program called Vet Motorsport to work as crew. And it took convincing the team owner that I was working with, took convincing him a little bit to allow the veterans to come in. But after explaining to him that, what the issues were, his biggest concern was working with a disabled veteran. But when I said, I'm a disabled veteran, he's like, "Oh, you are?" And it's like, well, there's all kinds of different disabilities that veterans deal with, and it's not necessarily missing a limb or whatnot, which is what his big concern was at that time. So had reached out to Vet Motorsports, got a couple of members to come in and participate as crew members on the teams. The guy liked it so much that it expanded out to additional veterans. And then in November of 22, I was approached by another team owner who asked me if we could set up an all-veteran AER team. And I was like, sure, it sounds great. But I started putting out the feelers to see who was out there that could drive, and very quickly realized that there were lots of people who wanted to do it, but not enough people had the experience to drive safely, particularly at the AER level. So started reaching out to other veteran organizations to try to see if we could get that experience going. Ended up partnering with Resilience Racing in February of last year, and worked with them to create this initial driver and crew development program. We had our first event in April that year. Got a picture of it actually. This was at pit race, and there were 4 veterans that were participating in that, myself included. That's the car that we were racing that day. The 3 guys, you can see I'm standing next to the team owner. There, the guy who's all in his gear already. He was starting that day, and then the 3 guys on the other side are Warrior2Racer members, and those 3 guys were handling crew for us. So they handled refueling the car and the fire bottle and that kind of stuff. And so that was our first event where we actually were participating. And then kind of from there, it expanded out. We got more and more veterans involved. Managed to get some folks with their first wheel-to-wheel experience. I think this is actually in order. Yeah, it is. So that's convenient. Sean, one of our Warrior2Racer members, had his very first experience at Summit Point. I believe that was in June of last year in that Mercedes. And then we picked up a dedicated car. We already had Resilience Racing already had a car with hand controls for folks that have leg amputation. And then we picked up this car, and you can see we're calling it DD. When you leave the military, there's a DD, a Department of Defense document, or DD 214 that you get when you are discharged. And so we managed to get the 214 as our number. And so the car became DD. So then Jake, the guy you see there in the car, he's one of our main crew members. He heads up crew coordination. He ended up working with the Angry Croc team, which is the Porsche Cayman, and the Golden Rotors team. Brought in his son, who's also a veteran. But the Angry Croc team, they actually, with their support, took, I believe it was 3rd in the championship for last year. Another big happening was Tanya. She's the furthest one over to the left in the group picture. She, through our efforts, got picked up for an all-female team that operates out of Houston, Texas. And so she's really excited about that. That was her first wheel-to-wheel experience. And then the last one I'll touch on, this is Andy. He had his first wheel-to-wheel experience that we made arrangements with another veteran organization called the Follow-On Mission. And we're going to be partnering with them in the future to get more veterans access to the program. And that kind of took us to November when we had our annual meeting, just the wrap up. And then already this year, we have had a lot of movement. We've started our own vodcast, and we're gaining a lot of traction with folks in the motorsport industry as well. So one of the biggest efforts that we're working with, we're trying to do it in conjunction with the Washington, D.C. region SCCA, is to have a severely disabled high-performance driver education program set up for Veterans Day weekend to be in conjunction with the Helmet Off to Heroes event, which at Summit Point Raceway. That's still very nascent. Don't know if that's going to be where it ends up. There's a possibility it could end up out in Gingerman. But we're working a lot of different angles on that. So I'm kind of rambling on here. So it gets back over to you for any questions on anything.
Well, no worries. And let me first and foremost say thank you for your service and the service of everybody in that program, because, we talk all the time, and I talk all the time about how, without local short tracks, you wouldn't have these big motorsports organizations. But without a country defended by people like yourself and all these great people within the program, we wouldn't have any form of motor racing. And a lot of how NASCAR got started, a lot of how the sport that I cover got started, was obviously with moonshining and bootlegging, but motorsports was such a big thing after all those boys got home from World War II. And one of my heroes is Red Byron, the first NASCAR champion, who was a vet that flew the B-24 bomber in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, and his leg was severely injured after he took a mission for a friend of his who was on call because his wife was having a baby, and Red nobly stepped up and took his mission, and ended up saving lives and ended up nearly killing himself in the process. Comes back to the States and ends up winning the first NASCAR championship. So veterans in racing and in NASCAR have always been a big thing. But first and foremost, thank you for your service, because without you and all the other countless men and women defending our country, we wouldn't have any racing. And it's even more special for me personally to see something like what you guys are doing, because I've had several family members that have served and been deployed and seen what you guys have seen. And I certainly haven't, but just having that kind of that personal connection, it makes it all the better to see a program out there like this that's not only doing something that I love to watch, racing, but is also helping people that have given more than any of us can ever imagine giving. So first and foremost, thank you for your service. But I guess had a couple questions here. Do you have one thing about racing specifically that attracted you to it before you started this program, or what was the thought process behind racing? Why didn't you go and start a hockey program, a football program? What was it about racing that really drew you into starting something like this?
Well, it was like I mentioned, I've been doing racing now for decades. I grew up in a racing family. It's something that's very natural for me. But one of the things, particularly with the endurance racing piece, and the reason why we went with endurance racing instead of the other forms of racing. I'm not trying to belittle any of these forms of racing. They're all, and I'm sure you realize there's lots of veterans that they get out and they go into racing because they miss the thrill or whatnot. But one of the main reasons why we went with endurance racing was not so much for the racing itself per se, but because it was a team. And because you have a team of drivers and you have to rely on each other. And then you have a team of crew members, and the drivers are filling in as the crew. If we don't have enough people, we're there fueling the car, we're helping with the driver's change, we're refilling the cool suit stuff. And so that was the main reason to do it. The racing is a fantastic perk for it, and it's very kind of like what I said earlier. It was natural to me to go that route because of it, but it's really the team and getting that camaraderie back together. The military folks, they're all high speed, low drag guys and gals anyway, and they're used to being in that kind of very action-packed type of activity, if you will. And so when you have that kind of reliance upon each other in the racing environment, it really does harken back to the military service. And that was really the main reason to do it this way, was so that we were building that team again, so that the military brothers and sisters could come together again and be part of a team again, which when I know a lot of folks experience it. I experienced it when I left active duty, that you leave that environment and it's very anticlimactic. They give you that DD 214 and you go, thanks. and then you kind of show you the door, and that's it. And you really miss the relationship that you had with your colleagues. There's a lot of support that you get from those other military members that you don't realize you have until you have left it. And so that was really one of the big reasons why to try to make this team environment again.
Well, I really like that you mentioned that team environment. You know, every sport, you know, for the most part, a lot of sports are team sports. Racing is a team sport, but that camaraderie, that's not something that's, you know, magically flows within every single group of people. And I think it takes a special group of people to not only be in a group, but thrive in a group and work well in a group. And when a team can work well enough in a group to win a motor race, I think that's one of the highest achievements for a team to accomplish, because in racing, you know, it's not like stick and ball sports. There's so many intangibles, and luck obviously plays a way bigger factor in racing than I think any other sport, probably just because, you know, we're not throwing around a leather ball that's inflated with air. We're racing in a machine, and machines, you know, mechanical failures happen, tires blow, engines blow, drive shafts drop out, transmissions go up in smoke. So when a team can accomplish something like they're accomplishing, and I like that you mentioned the finishes that y'all had. Y'all aren't out just, you know, you're not field filling. You're not starting parking. You're not just starting the car, putting it on the grid, pulling it in, getting your paycheck and leaving. You're pretty competitive, which is pretty impressive for a group like yours that hasn't been around too long. So what was it like getting this group together? You mentioned that you've only been around, I believe you said around a year. But how did you put this whole deal together? Was there a lot of paper being shuffled around, a lot of money being shuffled around? Who'd you have to meet? Like, how did this program start from the ground up and turn into pretty competitive, pretty fast race cars?
Well, you mean just from Warriors2Racers perspective, or like AER or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, Warriors2Racers perspective for this one.
Yeah, Warriors2Racers. It was a lot of calls early on with the other veteran organizations. A lot of time spent on Zoom and Teams calls so we could at least see each other. And there was actually two different organizations. I forget what the other one was, but the Resilience Racing Foundation was the most kind of forthcoming and with their support for what really was my idea to get going here as far as a driver and crew development program. And so it was pretty quick, really. There was an agreement that I signed between them and me, being the Warrior2Racer lead. It's been a fantastic relationship. They have given me full autonomy for the Warriors2Racers program. They just act as advisors to me to make sure that I'm not going off the rails. And so that was very, very easy. And then with all these different programs, it really was just doing a lot of coordination between the race team and the drivers, and making sure that I'm sure you saw earlier that the driver ladder, we try to make sure that anybody that we advocate for is not going to go out and demolish the car for the team. They have to have minimum levels of competency before we will recommend them to get into the wheel-to-wheel competition. And so we had enough of those so that when these opportunities came up, these were with organizations that already existed. Most of them were just plain old teams that were looking for driver-funded drivers to come in and drive. And so that the unfortunate thing is because we are so young, we don't really have any funds to speak of. The purchase of the of the car, the dedicated car for Warriors2Racers, and all the parts that I just paid for yesterday, which made my wife look at me sideways. But that's been out of my pocket. But I kind of expect that for any program to get the ball rolling. You know, we're not known yet, and so really kind of expect that that a lot of the funds and stuff is coming out of our own pockets in order to do this.
Well, I got to say, I really like that driver ladder, and I think you should probably email that to a few team owners in the lower series of NASCAR. Don't get me wrong. These guys have more talent in one bone than I have in the rest of my body, and they're like 9 years old. That's insane. But some of these wrecks and some of these races that I watch where there are cautions about every 3 laps because a guy just plowed into the back bumper, and I know NASCAR is a contact sport. It's not like some of these, it's not like Formula One where you touch somebody else's wheel and they go flying 10 foot in the air. But oh my goodness, some of these guys, I think they just fall asleep and then they lose control. Because holy cow, the levels of competency sometimes, especially in the lower series, are non-existent, but they're still very talented. But also, speaking of the second part of that, is there any way, is there a website, PayPal, some way that we can donate, the general public can donate to help fund the team? Because I know that'd probably be something you guys are looking for, even if it's in small monetary increments. Is there any way for us to do that?
Yeah, from the Warriors2Racers, Warriors2Racers.org website, there's a link to a GoFundMe page. Small donations can go through there. It actually is tied to the Resilience Racing Foundation. They get 5% of the funds to pay for administration. That was something that we the members got together for Warriors2Racers, and we all agreed that was the right thing to do. And so they get 5% off the top. The rest comes straight into Warriors2Racers. And none of us are paid. This is all volunteers. I have, I believe, 5 state reps now, and it's all completely volunteer. So all the funds go straight into getting veterans into motorsports, either to help pay for them to get to the track for their crew positions, or to actually pay for them to get in the car, or at least to diminish the size of the amount, because it's still very, very expensive.
Yeah, I was talking with the team president of NASCAR team earlier this year, and he said you would not believe how much just one little wreck sets us back. I mean, just motorsports it's got to be one of the most expensive sports out there. I mean, I know everybody always talks about lacrosse and hockey and whatnot. But I think it's even more admirable. It'd be admirable if you guys were paid, $400,000 a year salaries. But the fact that it's a volunteer organization that you guys are doing this and helping so many people and also helping to put on these races is incredible. The last planned question I had for you, and this might be more on a personal level, but as someone that is mainly a stock car racing fan, I might watch, I'll watch the Indy 500. I'll watch a lot of short track racing and whatnot. I don't know a ton about endurance racing. I'm just upfront about that. All my knowledge about it stems from the movie Ford versus Ferrari. But is there any race that you personally would like to go to? Any race that you would love to go to? The only really crown jewel ones I know about are the Rolex 24 at Daytona, which is happening in a couple weeks right before the 500. And I know Sebring, obviously Le Mans, where NASCAR went last year, which was a really cool thing to watch. Are there any races that you'd like to see the team go to for endurance racing, or that you personally would like to go to, being a lifelong racing fan?
Well, we're trying to get, we're a long ways from doing it, but we're trying to get these veterans to the point where they could do a WRL or IMSA race. That would be, I would love to see one of our veterans do that. As far as me personally, the one of the tracks that's on my bucket list is Sebring. There's if things go well and our dedicated Warrior2Racer car is still together by that time, next December, on the same weekend for the New Year's, there will be a champ car race at Sebring, and so that is on our tentative schedule to get the car down there. But yeah, that's probably the big one for this year. I have a lot of tracks that are still on my bucket list that I need to get to, but and drive at. But that's the big one for this year.
Well, hey, chase those goals. And I mean, your drivers, I'm sure they're fairly disciplined. You know, I'm not exactly sure, but I hear from some people I know the military is pretty good about discipline. I think the movies portray that pretty well. But if the drivers keep that car in one piece, and I think they can do that while also still going pretty fast, I'd love to see y'all in that race. And you'd have the support of an entire country behind you, which would be the cool thing. It'd be pretty hard to split fans' differences on that one. That was the last question I had for you, but if there's anything else you want to talk about racing wise about this program, yeah, we can do that, or whatever direction you kind of want this to head in now. Your call, up to you.
Well, we got to touch on the endurance racing in general. You mentioned earlier about how there's a lot of trading paint and whatnot in NASCAR, and outright wrecking folks and whatnot. In endurance racing, for one thing, the races are much longer. About the shortest race that we do is 7 hours, and so you can't do that. You can't trade paint. For one thing, the organizations that are putting on these endurance races are very strict, and if you are doing that kind of thing, you will at least get black flagged, if not told to go home. And they don't hesitate to do it at all. But if you're like trading paint and that kind of stuff, you see it in NASCAR. You can cut down a tire when the fenders come down and come in contact with the tire. When the tires that we use, we are trying to get an entire 7-hour race out of that set, and some of these guys manage to get, because we run 2 days back to back. In most cases, it's usually particularly in AER, it's 2 8-hour races, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. And some of these teams are getting through that 16 hours on one set of tires. And it's tough to do, but you can do it. I've seen it. And so if you're running into people and that kind of stuff, you can't do that. You have to really play the long game, literally, with endurance racing, and take care of the car and know when to push it. At key times, you can't try to go out and win the race even an hour into it. Not to mention the fact that you need to hand that car off to another driver, usually, that's following you. And so you try to make it so that driver has a decent car to get into. There's been one time in particular, I got into a car and the guy had flat spotted the tires so bad, didn't say anything about it. Flat spotted the tires so bad, I thought there was something wrong with the car. We ended up pitting because I thought we had a CV joint going, because it was that bad. But at any rate, that's the big thing with these types of events. And of course, it's the road course type of configuration. I know that like at Watkins Glen, I've seen they're going 3 wide in the runoff areas on like turn 1. That doesn't fly either. You have to be within track limits with these endurance races. So it's a very, very different focus, I think, than NASCAR. Not belittling that at all. It's just different. But yeah. I guess that was where I was going with that.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I think if NASCAR drivers, I'd love to see these sanctioning bodies just switch places and see these AER officials, or see the NASCAR officials officiate an endurance race, see these NASCAR officials, or see AER officials officiate a NASCAR race. I think every driver in the field, regardless of series, even in the Cup Series, every driver would be parked. They'd have to pick the winner out of a hat. And as far like, I don't think they have track limits in NASCAR. I'm not sure. There might be some obscure ones in the rule book. Maybe at Sonoma they have them. I'm not sure. But if they do, they don't adhere to them. And, you said you got to keep the car good for 7 hours. In NASCAR, when you're going to pit, at the most on a short track, your fuel run is only going to take you about 150, 160 laps in a Cup car. You're probably going to pit around halfway to that for tires. You can just drive the car as hard as you can from lap 1 to 500. You mentioned Cale Yarborough before we got on. I'm pretty sure Cale Yarborough was driving that car as hard as he could on the pace laps and pulling into the garage area. There are drivers like Kevin Harvick, David Pearson, the Silver Fox, of course, who would always, you'd think he's dead in the water, and then with 50 miles to go, here he comes. There are drivers, especially back in the day, because I think a big part of that's that they own the cars. They had to work on the cars themselves. They weren't, $1 million teams working on these cars for them. They were able to lay back and save their tires, save their stuff. They weren't shifting so hard they're breaking their transmission, which I've seen happen a few times. It's because guys get so aggressive on restarts and they miss a shift or they do something wrong there, and all of a sudden, hey, why is there oil coming out of the back of the car? But I love the part about endurance racing, and I'll admit I don't watch it a ton, but it's beautiful to me as somebody who just, I love NASCAR first and foremost, but I also love racing first and foremost. And to see guys just conserve their stuff and then go at it at the end, it's a breath of fresh air too to watch guys go for the win without making contact. It's great every once in a while in NASCAR, Martinsville, Bristol, a road course occasionally, to see guys beat and bang for the win. But when it seems like every week some guys making unnecessary contact, it just gets a little tiring, a little old, a little boring. And so to see guys race for the win completely clean, no, fist fights afterwards, which I'll admit are good entertainment, but no fist fights, no cussing each other out over the radio, just old-fashioned racing. Take off the boxing gloves, and just race. And that's the part I love about racing like that. And even, when Formula One has a good battle, I like that too, because they're not wrecking each other.
Right.
They're not going into the other driver's pit. The crew chiefs aren't, spitting at each other. The pit crews aren't throwing hands. And it's just refreshing sometimes to see drivers take a step back and not push their car way over the limit to the point that they're junking both of them and costing both their team owners $100,000 in damages. So that was a little tangent there. Longtime viewers of this channel know that when there is a race that becomes a wreck fest in NASCAR, I call them out. I've had to call out a few drivers I've interviewed on the show before just because shenanigans happen. And I've had a deal happen where I interviewed a guy that I'd kind of picked on the week before for over aggressive driving. I didn't mention that. Thankfully, he didn't see that show. But it happens a lot more than a lot of outside racing fans think. So it is refreshing to see guys do that. And I think these drivers having that military background, being disciplined, knowing that, knowing strategy too is a big part of it, because what I've learned from having family in the military is that even minute things like a meeting, meetings on a normal work day are strategized and planned out to the nth degree. And they are planned out in so many different ways. And usually things go pretty flawlessly, at least when you're at the office. So having that discipline, having a plan like that is just so cool to me. And then you look at NASCAR and it's during a caution and they're about to come in and pit. And the driver's like, all right, crew chief, what do you want to do? Crew chief's like, I don't know. It's up to you. Driver says, I don't want to make that decision. And you look at something like, and especially your team probably has better levels of planning than all these other teams. And it's like, we know exactly what we're going to do, how many tires we're going to take, how much gas we need, the adjustments, what repairs we need to make. We need to make any. It's very refreshing to see that. And I don't know. Going on a tangent here. I do love NASCAR, I promise. I do. But sometimes, man, the absurdity of this sport just kind of eats at you and makes you yearn for something a little more. I think that's all I have, to be honest, in terms of questions and everything. But thank you so much for joining the show. And of course, thank you for your service, and please, for me and the whole team here, tell that to everybody else too, because we wouldn't be able to do what we do. I wouldn't be able to do this podcast. I wouldn't be excited about racing starting up in a few weeks again for NASCAR without the men and women that defend this country and make racing possible, but also just make a living in this country possible. So thanks to you and all the team there for doing that. And thank you also for making a program like this. It's so cool, especially someone that has personal ties to veterans and people still serving, to see something like this. When it seems like sometimes people forget about veterans. They forget about people currently serving. I'm not saying everybody does or a majority of people do. I'm just saying sometimes you see that, and it's sad for me to see. So thank you for all you do, and a big thank you to the team there for doing something really cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would like to invite you if we do have the cool thing about endurance racing is that it is nationwide, and one of the really cool things is in most cases, particularly in the amateur leagues, AER and below, the Champ Car and whatnot, is it's usually free to go watch. And in a lot of cases, you can get right into the paddock and go up and talk to the drivers and that kind of stuff. So really encourage everybody that go out and support, those teams and everything. Because I know we get a kick out of it when people come up and ask how we're doing and everything. But yeah, again, I invite you out to the events.
Yeah, I'd love to get to a race. I'm not sure there's ever been an endurance race held in my native home state of Arkansas. There's not really a great place for one because there's not much to look at. But they could do a race around a rice field or something. It'd be really pretty if they went out to South Arkansas during harvest and got some combines and tractors and grain carts in the background. They'd have to get around all the farmers that are driving 20 miles an hour down the road when the speed limit's 60, just sitting there, hand out the window, looking out, seeing the field. But it'd be interesting to see if they could do an endurance race out here. But I appreciate the invitation, and I guess informally invite you to a NASCAR race. I don't have permission to do that, and unfortunately, their events are not free. But if you're ever able to make it out to a NASCAR race or even just a local short track race, we have a short track here at the Batesville Motor Speedway where Mark Martin cut his teeth. It'd be great to have you out to a race there and kind of, I guess, trade racing disciplines and go see, I guess, what we're both kind of missing. So I appreciate that. And it'd be great to meet you and the whole team one day. But thank you so much for joining the show. I hope everybody enjoyed this. And if you can, go to their website, support them if you can. Try to get to a race if you can, and to support this great organization. So, sir, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.